Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back again this week for another great guest. I love bringing you different guests with different viewpoints. And today I've got someone that I felt like I've already known because I've read several of his books and he's just got a wealth of knowledge. And I'm so glad he said yes to the Charge Podcast to join us. And it's Dr. Alan Hunt. He's a nationally known speaker and best-selling author. His books include Confessions of a Megachurch Pastor, How I Discovered the Hidden Treasures of the Catholic Church, Everybody Needs to Forgive Somebody, and 9 Words, a Bible study to help you become the best version of yourself. Dr. Hunt stepped aside July 1, 2007 as a senior pastor of Mount Pisgah. How do you say that, Dr. Hunt?
Mount Pisgah. Mount Pisgah.
Pisgah. A congregation serving more than 15,000 people each week through all of its ministries in Alpharetta, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. While at there, Dr. Hunt helped to develop a comprehensive ministries with children and students, as well as a Christian school with more than 1,200 students at a Beacon of Hope Pregnancy Resource Center and the Summit Counseling Center. On January 6, 2008, the Feast of the Epiphany, Dr. Hunt converted to Catholicism. This transition represented the culmination of a 15-year journey in which God began leading Dr. Hunt home to the church. In many ways, this transition was affected by the prayers of a group of Dominican sisters at the Monastery of Our Lady of Grace in North Guilford, Connecticut, who have been praying for Dr. Hunt since he shared lectures with them during Lent in 1992. Prior to a full-time ministry, Dr. Hunt worked in management consulting with Kurt Salmon Associates, an international leader in textile, apparel, and retail industries. Dr. Allen was educated at Mercer, Bachelor of Business Administration, and Emory, a Master of Divinity universities, before earning a doctorate in New Testament and Ancient Christian Origins from Yale University. Dr. Hunt and his wife, Anita, live in Atlanta, and they have 2 grown daughters. Dr. Hunt, it is a pleasure to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
Gary, good to be with you, man, and good to see some Chargers. That's awesome.
Yes, I am so excited about this, but let's start from the beginning because I think that helps. We gave a good bio of you, but really tell us the story, as you progressed, because you were in management consulting. You've done several different things, kind of that story that's brought you to the journey where you're at today.
Yeah, I always wanted to be in business. I grew up in a very ministry-centered family. My grandfather was a Methodist pastor. My great-grandfather was a Methodist pastor. My parents worked at Methodist colleges. But I really didn't have any interest in that and loved business, majored in finance, as you mentioned. Got really lucky and got a good gig coming out of college that had a lot of exposure to a lot of different kinds of stuff. But I traveled a lot. And in that consulting job, I really liked it and I was good at it. And they wanted me to be there. But there was just something inside of me that wasn't satisfied. It didn't feel like that was where I was supposed to be, that was what I was supposed to do. And so over the course of several years, my girlfriend and fiance, now wife, kind of got me back into my faith life that I'd wandered away from and back into the church. And I really, to be honest, I guess you'd say I experienced a reawakening in my faith. And really since God calling me to leave that and to go into full-time ordained ministry. So as you mentioned, I did that for 20 years as a Methodist pastor. The last 8 of those were at Mount Pisgah, which you can look it up now, Gary. It's the mountain in the Old Testament where Moses goes to look at the promised land. So Mount Pisgah, which is very hard to pronounce. And then when I had been a pastor for 20 years, that's when I transitioned and became Catholic, which is, that's a whole different podcast. We can talk about that sometime. But I've been Catholic now since 2008, so 13 years.
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing. I think one of the things I didn't plan on asking this, but I think you bring up is you kind of felt that reawakening. You had someone to help you call you there. What would you tell someone that's listening today? And of course, we have believers and non-believers in here. And one thing I tell people all the time, if you're going to listen to my podcast, you're going to hear both sides, because
Sure.
I believe that we need to hear both sides. But someone that's maybe fallen away, maybe they still believe, but they're not practicing, and it doesn't matter which faith it is. What would you tell someone to how to kind of open themselves back up to get that reawakening for themselves?
Yeah, and I guess I've got my own experience, which is probably different because I grew up in such a ministry-focused house, and most people don't have that experience. But I think there was just sort of this sense that my life the pieces didn't all fit together. I had lots of good pieces, but there was again kind of a nagging bit of emptiness, a nagging bit of lack of real sense of purpose, a nagging sense of dissatisfaction. And I was lucky that my girlfriend at the time, she had a much better faith life. And I did said, you really should go to church with me. If for nothing else than the fact that I'm asking you to go with me. and she's pretty cute. So I went with her. And then it began to kind of put the pieces of my life back together. It helped me to kind of, I'm a big picture guy. It began to help me put all the different pieces together in a big picture, and gave me a sense of purpose and direction, really more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. It's really opening up. We all read the C.S. Lewis books where the devil's talking about, trying to keep us busy. And this day and age, that's easy to do, but it's really just opening up and being willing to kind of listen, and that's one thing I found, I evangelize, but I don't evangelize of saying you need to go to church. Instead, it's more about how we practice and how we live. And maybe you find that calling from others that you're looking at. Now, I think you wrote an interesting book that everybody needs to forgive somebody. And I wrote about this in my recent book that I published in Cultivate Positive Culture. It's my number 8 action is, to me, forgiveness of self and others is the hardest. Why do you think for us, it's so hard for us, number one, to forgive just ourselves? Because I think it has to start there, I believe, but then to forgive others.
Yeah, forgiveness is tough, and I mean that's the reason I wrote that book, Gary.
It helps us, doesn't it?
Yeah, I wrote it for myself, man.
Exactly.
I really did. I wrote it because I'm not very good at it naturally. I mean, some people just seem to come by that. I have one of my daughters is really great at that. She's like an Olympic gold medal forgiver, and the rest of us we're not even in the qualifying round. And I just started collecting these stories about forgiveness and to try to inspire myself, because I knew this is an area I got to get better, because carrying all this baggage and stuff is it's weighing me down. It's going to kill me from the inside out, carrying around all this toxicity. And it's funny that you mentioned that book, Gary, because that's actually turned out, much to my surprise, to be by far my most popular book. It really has struck a chord with people. I think a lot of us struggle with that. And I think forgiving ourselves, this is my own take on it. I think one of the reasons it's hard for us is a lot of us are perfectionists. And if you're a perfectionist, oftentimes you hold yourself to a standard to where you just beat yourself up when you don't hit that standard, instead of showing yourself grace. And that's been a lifelong, I'm in my late 50s now. And that's, in all honesty, that's been a long journey for me to learn how to show myself grace. I've learned to not be a perfectionist about other people well before I learned to not be a perfectionist about myself. I still thought, oh, well, I'm going to not make any mistakes in that. And so when you mistreat somebody, or you do something that you really wish you hadn't done, to take a deep breath and go, you know what? I'm going to show myself the same kind of grace that I hope other people will show me, and I hope I show other people. And remember, again, you talked about, I come at things from a Christian perspective. Love other people like you love yourself. And if you're going to love other people, you got to learn how to love yourself first. So I think that's where, for a lot of us, that's the question I get the most about that book, is these 12 stories in the book are about forgiving other people. And I oftentimes get the comment, you ought to have your next book be about how to forgive yourself.
Yeah. It's so true, because I think when we learn that, that really helps us really understand ourselves. And some of the greatest challenges we have, and with some of the research I've done in the studies, we know that a lot of it comes at a very young age of what we adopt. So depending how you grew up, really can dictate that. Now, we can make those changes. You don't have to be that victim. You can become the victor of it, but it takes some work. It's just like the people that's listening to our podcast today. They're here trying to take something from that to learn from themselves. And that's really makes the big difference. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because to me, forgiveness, that was one of my challenges. That's one reason it's one of my 10 actions to live by that I wrote in my book, is because it's one of my hardest. And I'm very similar to you. And when you talk about the perfectionist, I want perfection out of me. I may not require that of everyone else, but for myself, I do. And that creates a real challenge there. And you've written several books, so we've got lots of things to talk about here, but let's just talk about in life's greatest lessons. I loved how you kind of created this fable, and you shared the philosophy of the legs model. Can you share that with your audience and kind of how that's backed up? And then I would tell you, go get the book, because it's easy to read. I've got a copy of it right here. He did it in a great fable format, which is a format that I truly love, because several of my books have been fable too.
Yeah, the inspiration for that really came from an old theologian that said very similarly what I have in that book, which, the legs model is love all you can, earn all you can, give all you can, and save all you can. And so the love all you can, that makes sense, because that's sort of our purpose. Earn all you can. It's not a bad thing to earn money. It's a good thing. God gave us that ability to create wealth, to earn money, and to do that for his purpose and his glory. And then to give all you can. I think that's where a lot of us struggle for different kinds of reasons. But to actually really be intentional about having a plan for what percentage of my income am I going to give away. Rick Warren, the great Baptist preacher who's at Saddleback Church out in California, I always remember one of his sermons. He said, "I don't think I would ever pray for God to bless my business unless I plan to use the proceeds from that business to glorify God." So if I'm just praying for God to bless my business so that I can have a bigger car or a nice lake house, don't think I'd be praying for that. I think God's blessing your business for a reason. And save all you can is not so much about saving for retirement, although I'm all for that, but it's about living beneath your means, and to save here and there, and not spend as much as you could, to take not only pressure off yourself, but to free up your income to be able to give more, because you're going to get more satisfaction the more of your money and the more of your life you give away, the more you're going to get back in return.
Yeah, I think that becomes the real key and we have quite a few business owners that's listening to this, and we're telling you, do well in your business.
Absolutely.
Because what you can do, you're blessing other people. Number one, when you employ, that's something that a lot of people don't realize unless they've been an employer. I always said when I had 150 people on my team, my greatest worry was not me. It was those 150 on my team, because if we failed, then they were going to be out of a job and they didn't know how they would be able to succeed. And yes, they could jump in, go get a different position, but it changes their livelihood. And I think that's the thing we have to realize. And then when you get blessed, then you're able to share that with others. And been very fortunate in my business to be able to do it. And a lot of people are, but how can you bless others? Because that's when the real gift comes, because really we've all heard the saying, but I'll be curious to get your take on this. We get a lot more when we give than we get, and in your life, have you seen that blessing?
Yeah. And it's funny because I didn't grow up a particularly generous guy, and I didn't start out a particularly generous guy. And I was, as I started into business, I really was about myself, about making money for me. I love me some me, as Terrell Owens would say. And again, it was my wife and my spiritual reawakening that helped me to discover the incredible power of not just giving, but of being disciplined about that and saying, here's the percent that I'm going to give away this year, and here's the people that I'm going to give it to, or the ministries I'm going to give it to, so that I know that I'm kind of maximizing my resources for the impact for the kingdom. And when I began to do that, I began to realize this is actually it's much more satisfying to me to be able to give to my parish, or to give to this children's home, or to give to whatever, than it is for me to buy myself a better car or a better suit. It's deeply, that's the funnest part of the month for me is when I write the checks to give. That's satisfying. The rest of it's just stuff. It's just stuff, and it goes away. But that other stuff, it lasts forever.
Yeah, a good friend of mine wrote a book called Connected for Good, John Stanley. And John talks about that in his. When you give, the thing is, it comes, especially when it comes from the heart, then you're really giving and you're making a difference. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm going to hold that question because with what you're doing with Dynamic Catholic, we'll come back to that. But I wanted to make sure I get in this question because number one, my wife says I need to know all 21 of these. So we're going to talk about the 21 undeniable secrets of marriage, of course. And this is another book that Dr. Alan Hunt has wrote. I won't make you share all 21 with us because I don't think we have that time. But what are the secrets to building that strong, happy, healthy, lasting marriages? Because today we're being challenged in the world, just like with our time inventory, people are trying to steal that away, keeping us too busy. But also we always sometimes want to look on the grass and it always looks greener on the other side of the fence when we need to look within our own marriages. How can we make that stronger?
Yeah, the 21 undeniable secrets of marriage, and I can't recite them in order for you, Gary. I'm embarrassed to say.
That's I don't.
But but I think the two that would stand out to me the most in response to your question, the one is kind of the secret of purpose. And again, I approach things from a Catholic perspective, from a Christian perspective. But I think the point's the same, and that is the purpose of the marriage is for my wife to help me become a better version of myself, and for me to help her become a better version of herself, and to help each other get to heaven. It's not just a contract to live together or to have kids together, or to share assets together or to share our lives, but there's a higher purpose there. And so that, when we're struggling, take a step back and go, you know what, my goal here, my job, my responsibility is to help you become the best version of yourself. And frankly, she's pretty easy. And part of her job is to help me become a better version of myself. And I've already shared with you two ways that she's done that, both in my faith life and my generosity life. And so to take a step back and go, okay, what's going to help you and me optimize the relationship? Then the second one is, that's the big picture. The second one's down in boots on the ground in the jungle, hand-to-hand combat kind of insight from a Jewish couple, John and Julie Gottman, who are marriage researchers out in Washington State. And they really, from a secular perspective, they really have more insight than anybody on marriage over the last 35, 40 years in the US. And they have the data to show that if they spend 10 minutes with you and your spouse, in those 10 minutes, if they spend that with you, they can predict with 94% accuracy after 10 minutes, whether your marriage will last or end in divorce. That's pretty staggering. First time they meet you. And the way that they do that, they say, is what they're looking for is 5 to 1. 5 to 1. For every one negative interaction, they need to see 5 positive interactions. And almost all those interactions are nonverbal. Some of them are verbal. I love you. Good to be with you. Thank you. Please. But most of it's eye-to-eye contact, direct, undivided attention, a squeeze of the hand, lean in rather than leaning away, not turning a cold shoulder, not shrugging, not sighing, not rolling our eyes. But for every one shrug, 5 positive interactions. For every one roll of the eyes, 5 positive interactions. And so our marriages are built in those little things. We think that those little things are just a part of our marriage. They actually are our marriage. It's in those little interactions, day in and day out, hour by hour, because you have hundreds, maybe even thousands of opportunities every day to interact with your spouse in the little ways. And are you turning away? Are you ignoring? Are you neglecting? Or are you engaging and building up and appreciating and loving? And that's where marriage is built, 5 to 1, 5 positive for every 1 negative. So the secret of the little things, man, the little things are a big deal.
Yep, they become a really big deal because you can tell, and I've been around several friends that we've been in lunch meetings, and you can tell when they start speaking about their significant other when they're struggling, because it's how they speak about them. And, they're not even in the room, but it's how they speak of them. And I will tell you, that's one thing I would tell anyone that's listening to this is, what are you doing? It's 5 deposits, make it really easy. Let's put it in banking terms, 5 deposits to 1 withdrawal. And that's what it comes down to. And Stephen Covey talks about that in the 7 Habits.
Yeah.
You've got to give more deposit. It's interesting. Shazard Shamin, the guy I'm following with Positive Intelligence, he's talking it takes 3 positives to overcome 1 negative. It's those ratios that is so true. If you want to be a positive person, I get asked this all the time because I can consider myself the positive culture mentor, is how do you stay so positive? I'll be honest, I have the same challenge as everyone else. It's cloudy outside today.
Yeah.
But I've got to decide to make my own weather today, not decide, okay, the sunshine is going to make me smile and be happy. We have to do it within ourselves. And then when we're talking about our significant others, how are we building that life together? And I think that's what you're saying. How are we building them together? And I remember that research from their book, and just think 10 minutes that they can determine this with a 94% accuracy. That's 9.4 out of 10, folks. That's pretty darn good.
That's an A. That's an A in every class.
That's right.
Staggering. And what's interesting too is just real quickly, since you have a lot of business owners, there's a professor at University of Michigan in the business school. Last name is Losada, Losada, who did a study on teams in corporate settings, and he put teams into 3 categories: high performing, medium performing, and low performing teams. And those were based on profitability, on customer evaluation, on self-evaluation: high performing, medium performing, low performing. And then he studied those teams. And what he found was that on the high performing teams, there was a ratio of 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. On the medium performing teams, it was 3 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. On the low performing teams, it was more negative interactions than positive interactions. So a lot of criticism, a lot of gossiping, a lot of backbiting, a lot of browbeating, a lot of negativity. Whereas on the high performing teams, they're saying, hey, Gary, I'm so glad I get to work with you. Good job on doing that, Gary. Hey, Gary, how's your wife doing? Those little things create better performing teams in our businesses, and they create better performing marriages. It's simpler than we make it. It really is.
Yeah. Well, and it comes down to some of it is our relationships. If you want to kind of bring your spiritual side out, one thing I would tell business owners, are you getting around others that have some of that like-minded that you do? Because if you're sitting around a table with a bunch of people that are struggling in their marriages and are being challenged, your marriage has a good chance to creating those challenges too, because you're going to think it's kind of self-inflicted, and that same reverse mechanism that's there. So bring yourself around people that will bring you to the others. And it kind of brings me to that point of really what Dynamic Catholic is doing, that you're doing a lot of work with now. And maybe if you can kind of share that mission of Dynamic Catholic and how you are sharing that message, because I just love the work that you're doing. And a lot of times it's through books and through programs, but there's so many different ways. Can you mind sharing that, Dr. Hunt?
Yeah, I mean, really, I partner with Matthew Kelly at Dynamic Catholic, and based out of Cincinnati. And really, our mission is to help re-energize and renew the Catholic Church in America, one parish and one life at a time. And so, really, what we're good at is we built a grassroots movement of people all across the country, rather than trying to top down go through the bishops and all the hierarchy in the diocese and the parish staff. But people in the pews, by creating life-changing resources for them, books, sacramental programs, First Communion programs, confirmation programs, marriage enrichment programs, and daily kinds of inspiration to really touch the lives of people in the pews to help them bring life to their families and to their workplaces and to their parishes. And so really trying to help renew the church in America from the bottom up. Yeah, so it's fun work, man. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I truly appreciate the work that you are doing. As I told you from the outset, I feel like I know you because I follow a lot of that. And I can tell you it's helped myself. As I told you, I've read several of your books, read a lot of Matthew Kelly's books, and that helps us. And that's one thing as leaders, as you're sitting here, you have to decide what it is. I'll share, and we'll have all Dr. Hunt's books that we've talked about and links that you can get a copy of those. But remember, the key is taking some of that information in and learning. And that's why you're listening to the podcast. Just if there was one nugget that we got today, that 5-to-1 nugget is so valuable tonight. When you go home, what are you going to do differently to make sure that it's 5-to-1? And change that outcome that's at home instead of being frustrated or being mad when you walk in. How can you change that outcome and let that other spouse know that you value them and you appreciate them for what they do? I have to do it because I'll better do it now because, of course, all my notes come from my wife. Dana puts all this together. And of course, I've done a little bit of research on Dr. Hunt too. But the reason the podcast is so good is because Dana takes the time to really get the information that I need. So then when I'm on the podcast, I can share with each of you chargers. So that's my background. Of course, she's working with me in the business and we're together, but we even have to work even harder at it because when you work with your significant other, there can be some real challenges come there. And I'm not telling you, it's not been a heyday every time. I frustrate her at times. She frustrates me at times, but we know that we've got to thank each other for even the smallest things and makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you work together because your work life and your personal life begin to kind of merge, and it's hard to kind of separate that out. And so it's a blessing in some ways, and in some ways it requires extra attention and extra effort. So, and back to one quick follow-up to something you said a minute ago, Gary, which I think is really important about you being positive, is lots of research shows that negativity is much more contagious than positivity.
Yes.
And so if you're hanging around people that are negative, it's much harder to unlearn that. It's almost like you have to populate your life with 3 or 4 times more positive people to overcome the negative people. So you made a really excellent point there, man. Really, really good stuff.
Yeah. Make sure. I mean, if you say you don't have time to read, just turn off the TV some. I don't care what you're watching, if it's news or what it is, turn some of that off and put it in the reading. You'll see that it benefits you tenfold in your life each and every time. Dr. Hunt, before we go into the recharge round, because you told me you'd take those hardball questions that I have and you'd try to not hit all foul balls and you'll try to put some out in the field since we're getting in that baseball season that's there in the second quarter of 2021. But before I do, is there anything that you just like to tell the audience that maybe a question I should have asked you, but I didn't, but just comes top of mind as they're moving through life and through the challenges that they have each and every day?
No, I mean, I think we've covered an enormous amount of ground here, Gary, in 20-something minutes, man. You're impressive. This is not for the faint-hearted, but it's like driving NASCAR right here. You got G-force. You're going 212 miles an hour with 40 of your closest friends 3 inches from you. It's a holy cow. But I think I would just reiterate that positivity is that you're right, that what we're putting in more often than not is what's going to come out. And so if we're absorbing negativity and we're absorbing just a lot of meaningless television and that kind of stuff, it's like eating a diet of potato chips and brownies. Eventually catches up with your body. And in the same way with your spirit and your energy level, taking in a lot of stuff. And I think you made an excellent point. Listening to podcasts or reading books, you don't have to trust everything. You don't have to believe everything. You don't have to do everything. Just looking for a little something here, a little something there, a nugget here, a nugget there. But you're continually taking in things that are going to produce positive results. And that's what they do. So I'm with you.
Super. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Now, I've got 3 questions in the recharge round I want to ask you. The first one is I have a mantra, and it's what the podcast is called, Charge. It's create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think has led to success in your life?
You know, it's funny when you told me that was me the question. My first response is I'm not sure that I have had success in my life. I think that's really hard to measure. You know, in some ways, I'm not sure I'm going to know on this side of the river. But I think that the daily habit for me, and I don't know that it'll surprise anybody, is just the daily habit of the time of prayer, of having the first thing in the morning. Being 5 minutes or 15 minutes, most of it's silence, just trying to be in the presence of God and let him shape my mind, let me experience his presence, his love, so that the rest of the day, I just find that the rest of the day goes much better when that happens than when I rush out of bed and I jump in. I think, I don't have enough time to pray. Actually, I don't have enough time not to pray. And when I make that mistake, my day tends to be more chaotic. Things don't work out quite as well.
Yeah, I'm sure my chargers think I set my guest up to say something in the morning, because probably 7 out of 10 realize that some sort of morning ritual like prayer, getting themselves centered, getting themselves set for the day is the number one secret. I just hope my chargers are hearing that it doesn't have to be 30 minutes, an hour. Mm-hmm. It's 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's setting yourself that centering and setting that intention. We believe in prayer that's there. And I guarantee you won't regret it once you get started with it. How about one simple positive action you take each day to move forward towards your goals?
I'm a list maker. And I learned that early on, is that even though I've got, I'm a little old school. I keep a lot of stuff on my iPhone, but also have my legal pad with me, and you can see the list of stuff for today on my legal pad. And so I've got my year sort of sketched out. I've got my month sort of sketched out. I have my week sketched out, and then I have a list every day of, here's the stuff you really got to make sure you get done. Here's the stuff that'd be nice if you get done. Here's the stuff, if you have extra time, you ought to spend a little time on it. So I'm organizing. The last thing I do each day before I have dinner and hang out with my wife is organize the next day. So organizing that day. And for me, it's a list. Other people may have much more sophisticated systems than I do, but for me, it's just that simple list of most important, least important. And if you get to do this, it'd be great if you could read some of this book, et cetera, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the key is just having some sort of system that works for you, each and every person. How
intentionality.
Intentionality. How about your biggest life lesson? What did you learn from it?
Well, I think we touched on it earlier in the idea that it took me a while to figure this out, but I think the biggest life lesson for me has been the more of my life I give away, the more life I have. You know, if you're going to gain your life, you're probably going to need to lose it in the process. The times when I've focused more on me have been the least satisfying moments, and the times when I've given myself away have been the best moments. So I think the more I give away, the better off I am.
Well, we're so glad you gave today to be on the podcast with us, because I'm telling you, my Chargers, I don't know if you're as excited as I am, but I think there was some real nuggets that came out. And Dr. Alan Hunt, we can't thank you enough. Please tell them how they could reach out to you if they want to connect with you or pick up some of the materials of Dynamic Catholic or check that out.
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to dynamiccatholic.com, dynamiccatholic.com. My email is Allen, ALLEN, at dynamiccatholic.com. But all the resources that we produce, Matthew, Kelly, me, our team, is all there at dynamiccatholic.com. And really, Gary, the reason I came on was because Dana asked.
I knew that. I figured that.
She said, Gary's got to become a better husband. Please come on this show.
Well, you've helped. That 5-1, I'm going to work on that a little bit better, because I know some days I don't get there.
Great.
Well, I truly appreciate you coming on the Charge podcast. It's been a blast interviewing you and sharing you with the audience. And I know the Chargers are going to be excited as they hear this podcast. And the key I would tell them is what we started with is, let's think about that 5-1 ratio. That's the one action I want you to take away. Take other things that you take too, but I want tonight, put it in action. When you get home, or start it today, you could take your phone out. I know everyone has a phone. Take your phone out right now and send a special text to your spouse, something that she's not heard from you for a while. And it could be as simple as, I love you, and put your name to it. Now, she may think you're sick if you haven't ever done this before. And when she sends back, what's going on? You can say you listened to a podcast and you were challenged. You decide. Or you can just say, I was thinking of you, dear. And then maybe give her this podcast.
Then you got two positive interactions.
Exactly.
Then you say, I was just thinking of you. Now you got two. I mean, you got positive forward momentum, baby.
That's right. So you're going to be rolling. So Chargers, make that happen. Dr. Hunt, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Gary.
Chargers, remember, come back next week and we'll have another great podcast. If you've enjoyed this as much as I have, please like and share it. Let others know about it. Maybe you've got a friend that is struggling right now, maybe in their marriage. Maybe this would be a podcast that you hit that share button on and you go ahead and forward to them and say, hey, I really think you need to listen to this. I think it could be beneficial to you. Remember, you're giving instead of getting, but that's where the real gift comes from, is when you give. Thanks, Chargers, for joining us. We'll see you back here next week. Make it a great day.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.